Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the pre-show for Season 2, Episode 2 of TNT, Tuesday Night Talks. Tonight, we're going to feature Laurie Papou, and this is your opportunity to check your audio and check your video and get settled in for the next 50 minutes. Grab some popcorn, maybe a juice, pop, or beverage of choice. Here in British Columbia, the COVID pandemic is still upon us, as it is worldwide. The province has renewed the health order that restricts non-essential travel through to February 5th, and I would encourage all of you to be diligent about your social distancing and your general social practices. Here at the Audain Art Museum, we're taking every precaution to keep both our visitors as well as staff safe at all times. The museum is open from 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. Thursday through Sunday, and as we always do in the pre-show, you go to audainartmuseum.com to get this wonderful Emily Carr umbrella for all those rainy days in Vancouver. Not to mention a wonderful Emily Carr book that covers the exhibition that we did here that is actually still on display at the Royal BC Museum for another few weeks. Thank you, Nadine. Okay, I think we're getting close to going live, and now everyone will see me on the big screen. There we go. Thank you, Justine. So, as I said, welcome to Season 2, Episode 2, and we're delighted to have this entire series of TNT sponsored by HSBC Bank Canada. As mentioned in the pre-show, the health order restrictions in BC are still on for the next number of weeks, and I would encourage everyone to adhere to Dr. Bonnie Henry's efforts. Tonight, we're in the Permanent Collection Gallery here at the Audain Art Museum. Again, we're still by the flashlight's glow. This evening, we have a wonderful piece just here behind me by Laurie Papou. It's an oil on wood created in 2000. The title of this piece is "She Saw Her Fallen Clothes as a Charity, a homage to missing trees," and it's part of a larger body of works by Laurie called the Vanity Suite. Tonight, we're also thrilled to have over 300 registered viewers, and that really speaks to the success of this effort here at the Audain Art Museum in Whistler, and we're here also on the shared territories of the Squamish and Lillooet nations. And now we go live to her studio in Boundary Bay. Good evening, Laurie.
Good evening, Curtis.
How are you on this rainy night in British Columbia?
I'm good. Yeah, it's okay. We're in a nice warm space, and so it's good.
Great. And just wanted to say thank you. It's a beautiful setup in your studio behind you. And so let's launch right into the discussion tonight, and we'll bring up the first image, and we'll hand it over to you from there, Laurie.
Okay. So this is the first image, I would say, in the body of work that's called Vanity Suite that I showed in 2000 at the Bogie Gallery. And this body of work, well, if you go through, this is, I'm going to have to read this because I can't remember the title, so give me 1 second. She wished she had been named Hope as a reminder. So that's the title of that painting. And this is the beginning of this figure taking her clothes off in the clear cut. So next. So this, this is the second position of the figure taking more clothing off. And the title is Because Faith Was Not Lost in the Chaos All Around Her, She Was. Next. So this is the painting in the gallery, and that is the last of the female figures taking off her clothes in the clear cut. Next. Okay, so this is the male figure in this story, and he has turned his back on the female figure who is stripping and sort of looking back like, I don't want this anymore. And he's going into the forest. And, the forest is a place of comfort. It's very restorative, emotionally, mentally. And so, between the clear cut on one side and the forest on the other side, we're really talking as well about how people deal with their emotions and then where they get their, their ability to keep going. And I grew up right outside of a huge forest. So the forest for me it's a big part of my psyche. I played in the forest every single day as a child. And seeing clear cuts has always been just absolutely traumatic for me, as well as probably for a lot of people out there. And I really see that clear cut as being equivalent to feminist sort of ideology about women being objectified and, excuse me, sorry, I can't really go on about that very much more, but yeah, so this is sort of the basis of this work. I was interested in the three graces, hope, charity, and faith. And I looked into both the Greek mythology as well as the Christian theology about what these represented. And in Christian theology, the three graces were always seen as one. And whereas in Greek mythology, the graces were always holding hands. So this, this sort of sisterhood was quite interesting as well when looking at, the reasons that I was interested in doing this body of work.
Now, Laurie, if I might interrupt, would you consider any of the three female figures faith, hope, or charity, or did you get that literal in the translation of these?
Can you say that again? I'm sorry, I didn't totally understand.
So you had mentioned the three graces, faith, hope, and charity. And I wondered if those were aligned with the particular images in this series.
Yes, they were. So it begins with, faith, hope, and then charity. And so, yes, so the installation of this show was very important. And on one wall, you saw the three graces in their various states of undress. And directly across from these paintings, you can see the male figure looking back at the females on the other side of the gallery. So this was the only work that was in the gallery. And so when people, that came to see the show at the opening or whatever, they would walk in and become, they because of their presence, standing in between the female figures and the male figures, they would kind of end the dance.
Excellent. And just as a point of reference, this exhibition, the Vanity Suite, was in roughly 2000. At which gallery, please?
The Bougie.
Okay. And perhaps we can go on to the process shots.
Sure. Okay. So this is the working drawing for the painting that's at the Audain Museum. And in these drawings, I essentially am figuring out my composition. And, I use the big X, the big square, to make sure that everything is sort of leading into this very concentrated middle section. And, in a very dynamic, sort of composition. And then the little yellow Post-it notes are where I have figured out which photos I need to use. And I've written down the slide or the negative numbers so that I can have multiple of those images printed. As well as there are numbers that are me trying to figure out the ratio between the size of the figure and the size of the board so that things match up.
I must compliment you, considering this series is over 20 years old now. The fact that you've archived all this preparatory work along with the Post-it notes is quite admirable.
Well, I really like my working drawings. So this is the middle of the Graces, Hope, and then what do we have next? We have the okay. So that one is Faith. And again, I'm just doing these drawings, figuring out my composition, and just making adjustments as to how I want. I mean, you can't really tell, but I've sort of changed the positions of certain parts of the body in these drawings and then worked on that through to the actual painting. Next.
And are you just using graphite for these drawings?
It's ink. I use ink on these. Ink. It's on onion skin paper. And yes, and I paint on board, and I paint in oils. And people have asked me why I paint on wood, and I'm allergic to canvas, and wood is beautiful, and we're surrounded by wood in our lovely province of British Columbia.
Okay, and there are some more preparatory images.
Yes, so I didn't take the photos of myself or my husband Ian in the location. I did the shots of the location and then went home and did all of the other figures in my backyard. So I have cut out here the photo of me in the backyard and superimposed it onto the clear cut, and that's what I would be working from. And that's just
wonderful.
Clear cut with my little painting smudges on the photo. Next. So that's me in the clear cut. Down at the very bottom, you can see one of the pieces of machinery that was used to take all these trees out. And I was always worried when we were walking through there, and we went many, many times over a couple-year period, that we were going to be running into a bear, because it really was, although it was close to the I-5, it was pretty remote. And we didn't ever bring any bear, stuff to help protect ourselves, like making a big noise or, having bear spray, any of that stuff. We didn't even think about it.
Well, thankfully, you didn't have any unwanted visitors to your scenes.
Yes, exactly. Okay, so what's next?
Okay. And now we have a series that came after the Vanity Suite, but very closely related in subject matter and some of the imagery. Perhaps you can begin to discuss the piece we have in front of us.
Sure, yeah. So this series is called Bambi, and it is it's based on the actual story, the children's story, Bambi. And I go through 4 scenes of the story. And this is scene 1. And as you can see, there's the mother doe with her fawn. And in the left corner, bottom corner, there is a figure that is in this, very protective, trying to cover, position. And then you can see the arrows either going right towards the deer or just away from the deer. And this one is called Scene 1. Okay, so next. And this is Scene 2. And so as you can see, the same figure in the same pose is on the left-hand side of the painting. And you can see arrows going through the sky. And on the right-hand side, you can see this little, baby fawn all by itself without its mother.
And you've, this is clearly a horizontal in format, which is quite different from the earlier works. Is there a particular reason that you chose the horizontal format here?
I think it was, to do with like cinematography, like just a longer shot of a scene, as opposed to just boxing it in with a more rectangular shape. And this gave me the space that I needed to do this work, with the space in between the figure and the fawn. I wanted there to be a big transition space in between the two of them.
Yes, a very, very effective use of that horizontal format. Yeah, it does have that, as you mentioned, filmic quality to it.
Yeah, and one of the things I like about this painting, which I haven't seen this painting for a long time, so I'm just getting reacquainted with it, but seeing the log, the skinny log that's going right from the female figure's back all the way to across the back of the little fawn. Using these sort of things to connect the two images, which I sort of do that with all of my work, but this was like in a different kind of scope.
Excellent. Okay.
So this is Scene 3, and this is where the female doe has been struck, and the female figure is now on the right-hand side of the painting, and you can see that the doe has died, and there's in a bed of leaves, and the blood coming from its neck. And so I'm just actually going to go through to the next one before I start talking about other stuff okay, so this is Scene 4, and in this scene you can see there's a painting of the fawn all by itself, curled up, and then what you see over top of that is actually a video projection, and it starts off with the female figure, as you see there, in that same pose, the all curled up pose, and then she slowly rises and walks out of the picture, and so yeah, okay, so this this body of work was sort of the beginning of a whole bunch of other work I did after this, where I started to use a video projection, and not just for the sake of it, but also for it as being the light source, and the fact that the light source was moving, and it was also creating some dynamic energy to either the specific painting or the body of work. And this body of work is kind of interesting. A collector of mine wanted to come for a studio visit, which she did, and before I had even shown this work to anybody, she bought the entire show. She bought the entire collection from Bambi, and she also has the entire collection in her house, including the video playing all the time, which I think is remarkable.
Yes, absolutely astounding. And I'm just curious, how would you describe the relationship between the moving image and the painting image in this instance?
Well, the moving image is, the female figure walking away from this sphere, getting up and saying, okay, I can leave now. I don't have to be afraid, and I don't have to be in a vulnerable state. Whereas the fawn is still in the vulnerable state. So,
Excellent.
Yeah, and this is another body of work, like Vanity Suite, where the entire body of work is the work. So each individual piece is just a painting, but the actual essence of the work is all of them combined. Because both of Vanity Suite and with Bambi, they're very much about telling the story. And with Bambi, I made it more clear in that I titled them scene 1, scene 2, scene 3, scene 4, and had a very obvious, narrative to the story.
And in the female figure, the reference is to another very well-known painter. And we can, before you want to get that, oh, here's the Bambi figure, sorry. Do you want to have a few words about this image?
Yeah, this is just a like a close-up of that overall piece. So that's the little deer painted lying in the leaves that its mother died in. Right, so this is the image, the painting that I took that pose and posed myself in for the whole Bambi series. And the artist that did this work, his name is Fishel. He's a artist based out of Manhattan, I think still. And he showed up until, I'm not sure how long, but he showed at the Mary Boone Gallery for years. And we were in New York during the time that this exhibition was on, and Eric Fishel is a painter that during the 80s, him and a number of other painters became like kind of the boys club of painting, and they were extremely successful. So, and actually interesting, Eric Fishel also taught at NASCAD sort of right after he finished school. So that's kind of an interesting Canadian connection. But so, I really liked his work, and his work was, it was work that I saw when I was probably about 19, and I went down to Los Angeles and I saw a show at the MoCA, I think it was, and I saw his paintings and it was just absolutely, well, I knew exactly what I was interested in with regards to matter when I saw his work. So going back to the fact that we were in Manhattan when this exhibition was on, I knew where his studio was in Soho, and so I really wanted to meet him. And I went down to the street, Green Street in Soho, and I buzzed him. He was in his studio, and when he answered, I just said, "Oh, hi, it's Laurie." And he buzzed me up. And when I got upstairs, he was standing in the hallway and he said, "Do I know you?" And I said, "No, you don't." And I went in and we talked for a couple of hours. And when I was leaving, he said, "You got really big balls."
That's a brilliant story, Laurie. I'm very envious of, I'll call it your moxie rather than any body part.
Yeah. Yeah, so yeah, then, and so there's the figure back in the painting that we've seen that I've borrowed from the Eric Fishel painting. And just one other thing about these paintings. So with this wood, this is just like a 4x8 door skin. And sometimes you could find them really light, like really pale colored wood, but other times they would be really dark and you just couldn't find a light one anywhere. So what I did with this work is I figured out the patch that the female figure was going to be in, and I bleached that section of the wood so that her lightest lights would be lighter than any of the other lightest lights of the exposed wood.
Very good. And the one thing I'm drawn to in this Bambi work is the fact that the female figure is somewhat kind of camouflaged in the way that you've rendered her, in a similar way that the actual deer, in its natural setting is also camouflaged. Is that intentional by any chance?
Yeah, it was, and it's trying to keep all the subjects there connected. And like animals, have their natural camouflage in forests, etc., so that hopefully, prey doesn't see them as easily. I wanted that to be a part of the female figure in, the shadows across her back, and just, the blending of colors into the surround, the forest floor.
So those are really nice connections between the Vanity Suite and this Bambi series. And at this point, we're going to move on to the question and answer section of the broadcast. And our first question comes from Carolyn in Squamish, and she asks if there was a particular area, that being a clear cut, that inspired this work, and then maybe you found it afterwards in a more practical fashion. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, all of the clear cuts that I've seen throughout, Canada and the rest of the world, and certainly BC, because this is where I've grown up, it's just been appalling seeing the forest torn apart like that. And so clear cuts were always on my radar throughout, my entire life. And knowing that this needed to be a part of a group of paintings as the background, because of my extreme feelings of dislike towards the whole idea of clear cutting a forest and all the ramifications that has. But all of the clear cuts in British Columbia are very hard to get to. There's not like a road, taking there quite easily. And I happened to find this place in Washington State, and it literally was on the side of the freeway. And it was a very short drive from the freeway to get up to it. And you could get essentially right, like where I actually got out of the vehicle and started doing photography, etc., was, a 100-foot walk, which made it very convenient. And so it was just basically finding a source for the subject of the clear cut. And no matter where a clear cut occurs, it all has the same negative ramifications for, environment, for human emotion. The forest is something that helps people to feel emotionally better and grounded. And there's been, a lot of studies, and also in certain parts of the world, sort of, I can't remember what it's called, but essentially like forest therapy, where people are taken into the forest on a regular basis. And it's been proven and shown that it actually really helps increase their mood. So for people that suffer from anxiety or depression, this is something that is very helpful. And so when you see a clear cut, I think for probably everybody that sees a clear cut, it just seems wrong. It just looks wrong. So
yeah, it seems indicative of a trauma, if you will. The next question we have comes from Miriam in North Vancouver, and she asks if you could talk about a little more the processes that you use to render your images, models, photographs, projectors, etc., and if you have any sort of, standardized approach in the lead up to a painting such as the one behind me.
Right. So my process has changed because, you don't have to use photography in that way anymore. So that was a while back. But yeah, so I would, obviously come up with an idea and work on that idea, figure out, okay, why do I want to do this? What is this about? And typically for my work back then, and probably still now, it was all drawn from my experiences in life and my subconscious as to how I was putting that out there. And so, yeah, I would, sort of get the plan together about the body of work, and then I would start doing the photography. And the whole thing just sort of unfolds, and it's not one specific thing after the next. It's taking photographs that then changes what I'm thinking about with regards to the background or the, you know, the female or the, like, so it's all sort of a big group of information at the same time that I'm sorting through in order to come out with the definite paintings. Because my paintings take so long to do, I do not want to start a painting and spend 6 months on it and then say, you know what, I should have done this differently. That would be so yeah, then I take photographs and I go and I do my drawings, and then I transport that onto the plywood, the door skin, and I use chalk. I draw them out in chalk so that it's easy to change, and so that when I'm painting and I get up to the chalk, the paint just dissolves the chalk, so you know, you don't see the drawing.
Excellent. Oh, that's a wonderful way to kind of explain some old school cut and paste techniques. The next question comes from Pamela in Mississauga, and to a certain extent, you've answered it already. You had mentioned, and she asked about why you paint on wood panels, and you had mentioned that you're allergic to canvas, and wood was another option. Have you ever kind of experimented with different kinds of wood surfaces in your work?
Yeah, I have. So the current work that I'm working on, I'm using a different, it's not door skin, it is it's a product called Baltic birch. And I will talk more about that when we look at those paintings. But yeah, so once I found this other wood that I could use to paint on, I went to that because of the difference of the sizes that I could get. Because with the door skin, which you buy from places like, you know, Windsor plywood, you know, those kind of places you can buy the stuff from. It's not very expensive. And but it's, you know, you can only buy 3 by 7 foot pieces or 4 by 8 foot pieces. So you're limited to a 4 foot width unless you wanted to, you know, but the wood up together, up one, you know, next to each other, which I have done with paintings in the past. But yeah, and when I was in art school with no money, one of my instructors said, well, you know, just go up to Windsor Plywood. You can buy a piece of plywood for like, you know, $3 to paint on. And so I did. I went up and I bought a piece of plywood and I brought it back down to my painting space. And I was gonna prime it and paint it white. And then I stopped and I looked and it was wood. And I was like, I can't paint this white. This is a living, beautiful thing. I can't paint it white. And so I never have. I've never painted it white.
Excellent. Well, thank you for that explanation. Yeah, it's very unusual in terms of your practice maintaining that adherence to a specific support. The last question we have is Susan from Nova Scotia. She asks, what environmental, social, or political issues are you dealing with in your current practice? I lost my earbud.
Well, you know, my current practice is more holistic, I think. Since I did this work, and nothing has changed about my desire to protect the environment, my desire to protect all creatures living. And, you know, we're a vegetarian family. My husband and I haven't eaten meat for over 30 years, and our son never has. So that's something that I feel quite proud of, because that really speaks to my love of nature, you know, going back to that series of Bambi, and bringing up those sort of childhood memories of that story and of that concern for the mother and the baby deer. I'm kind of getting off track here. So as far as, you know, environmental, that's just an ongoing part of my life. It's ongoing. And you know, when I say holistic, part of what I do, and I have done now for a number of years, is I'm very, very into gardening like crazy into gardening. And I grow really unusual, very rare plants and trees. So, this is also how I am dealing with my concerns about the environment, is creating an environment in my backyard where birds and other wildlife have a place to be and to live and exist. Um, and as far as, any social stuff, again, it's, um, I'm a lot older than I was when I did this work. And although I feel the same way about the same subjects, and problems in the world and good things in the world, just the way I'm presenting those things has aged with me.
Well, that's a great segue into your current work, which, as you said, now is 20 years forward from the piece behind me. And we'll begin with the first image in some of your current pieces.
Okay. So this painting there's 3 paintings in this small little series of irises, and it's a family portrait. So this is my son Francis's iris. And I think I took this photograph when he was probably around 10, 11, somewhere in there. So kids have a much more beautiful iris. You can see these big spaces and the big dark spaces. And it's just the depth in a child's iris is quite incredible. And as you age, all those shapes get kind of squished together and it's not nearly as beautiful. So this work is painted on this Baltic birch that I was mentioning, and it is a 5 by 5 foot square piece of wood, which I've just left. I primed the surfaces though, so that the paint sits on top rather than, penetrating into the wood. And took photos. It was pretty hard to get any one of us to have our eye open enough to get the entire iris, but we did it. And so this is Francis's iris. And then the next one, that is my husband Ian's iris. And as you can see, the big wide spaces start to get a little narrower and a little more stringy. And when I look at these paintings, and I was looking at these today when I was going through the slides, and I realized, like, this is not just a circle and a square. This is a circle and a circle and a circle, and then a square. And this work that I was working on was very much about the geometric forms in nature and how they reproduce over and over again in all parts of nature. And the sort of concept between nature and the circle of life and the square containment. So anyway, next one. So that's my iris. And yeah, the lines are pretty tight together here. And this painting, I actually sent it to an exhibition when it was still wet. I painted this right up until the last minute. And again, I was talking to my husband Ian here in my studio today, and I was saying, this is the first time I've looked at this painting since I painted it. And typically during the time I paint on a painting, I'm just in an argument with it the entire time. And then when I finish the painting, I hate it. I hate it for causing me so much grief, and because it didn't work out exactly how I wanted it to. And so then I can't really look at it for a period of time. And so when I looked at this painting today, and all the other ones too, I realized, these aren't bad paintings. There's some things that I did in those paintings that I really like, and then I forgot that I did. So that's always a good thing.
Excellent. And then accompanying these, you have some cross-cuts of wood.
Yeah. So this is the other part of this body of work, which was called Perfect Geometry, which included the 3 irises. And then there are also coming up this plus 2 other cross-cut sections of wood. And so these pieces on the wood came from the devastation of the storm, in Stanley Park, the windstorm that knocked down hundreds of trees, which again, being for me, having the forest and trees being so much a part of my general well-being, I couldn't wait to get back into Stanley Park to see what had happened and sort of trying to start to make sense of it. And so, this was a number of weeks after the storm happened that you were able to go back into the park. And so we did, and I had my camera with me and started to just take photos of these cross sections. And these were all stumps that had already been cut by, who the cleanup crew was to start, just getting the mess taken care of. And I took a whole bunch of photographs of all different of these cross cuts of the stumps that were left, and chose the three that I did for reasons that I just really liked them the best. And they described in each one what I was interested in. This painting, The Big Black Hole, was a very important part of my decision to use this image. Whereas I think it was the first image that not that one, I don't know if anybody can see it besides me, but you can see that into the center circle, amongst circle, 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 is what I think looks like a penis. Just saying. I don't know. But I thought that it's sort of like looking at clouds and seeing other things.
Those are great. I mean, I think the iris portraits off against the sections of the crosscuts of wood from Stanley Park really bookend this piece behind me in the Audain collection off against what you're doing currently. And then lastly, we're going to talk about a current piece that's a rather large scale portrait.
Yeah, so this is a painting that I've been working on for so long, I don't actually even want to say, because it's been a long time. And I put many hours into this painting a day, many, many hours, often well more than 12. Sometimes I've stayed up until 6 a.m. working on this painting. Excuse me, it's a bit obsessive in that once I get started and I get my brain placed in the exact right place that it needs to be to start to understand what I'm looking at, I have a really hard time walking away from it. I've gotten a little bit better in the last year, but yeah, so I spent a lot of time in my studio at nighttime in the dark, getting to bed just when my other half was getting up to go to work. But so this painting is a portrait, just a genuine portrait of a very lovely person who I wanted to do a portrait of for years. And I had done a number of other portraits of a variety of people. Some musicians, some artists, etc. And this was a very, very dear friend of ours who unfortunately has died. And he died shortly after I took the photos of him. So I didn't start this painting for quite a while after I took those photos. And this painting is a very different, although it's a realistic painting, the actual, if we can go to, I think the next slide shows more of the detail. So if you look at that, and I don't know if you can even see it in that detail, what I'm looking at, for starters, I wear glasses now, I wear reading glasses, and I use an iPad to work from. And so on my iPad, I have that image, but then I expand it so that I see every little tiny inch of that face and all of the information in that little tiny inch of that face. And I'm trying to gather all of that and put it together and make sense. So that's a slightly more close-up of something that I've just been working on. It's not finished yet, but that's sort of the first stage of that little section of the painting, which I think that was 2 months worth of work, which is actually very fast. I'm getting faster. And so again, there's just another close-up of the painting. And with portraiture, I think it's something that some people think it's passé. I think it's sort of making it a resurgence. There's a lot of contemporary portrait painters in the United States whose work that I've been looking at, and it's portraiture is trying to, well, for me, it's trying to find a way to give that life, the essence of that life, give it to a surface that it's going to remain on. So there is Dave's eye. that I'm working from when I'm painting.
It's interesting to note, Laurie, that you know, these very detailed shots, particularly of the eyebrow and the fellow's hair, in some ways they remind me of how you rendered the trees in the clear cut backgrounds of these Vanity Suite works from over 20 years ago now.
It's true. And, you know, the Vanity Suite pieces, the backgrounds and clear cuts were pretty ominous. You know, I really had to have my game on just to start doing those. But that was super easy compared to what I'm doing with this painting. And I don't think any of these images really showed. I think you have to actually see it in person to really see, you know, what I've done with this painting. And I don't know that I'll ever do it again because it is exhausting, but it's been a really good exercise. The learning curve has been really high. And I did take a chunk of time off recently because one, we got a puppy. Puppies are just like having a baby, almost. And then we moved. So between the puppy and the move, I didn't get a lot of work done for about a year, but I've been back in the studio now since September. And as I said, my work is getting faster, which is great, to be able to be producing the image faster than I have been in the past.
Well, thank you, Laurie. And I think this is where we'll wrap up this evening's broadcast. You can definitely see a work ethic and a diligence that you've maintained for over 20 years now. I also have thank yous to our staff here at the Audain Art Museum for maintaining this institution's resilience in a very difficult time. I also want to extend my respect and appreciation for the ongoing support of Michael Audain and Yoshi Kurosawa. Similarly, our trustees as well as our founders provide us with guidance and contributions to propel this museum forward in what, as I said, is a very difficult time. I'm always very thankful here for our TNT crew, our director and producer, Justine Nickel, our quality controller, Nadine Hassan. And we have a few shout outs, as I always do, to my dad in Cornwall, my little sister in Canada, and Laurie has asked me to give a shout out to her technical supervisor and husband, Ian Ross, as well as to Francis for his diligence behind the scenes. And I also want to say thank you to Stephanie and Victor, who we've been working with from HSBC. And as I said, HSBC Bank Canada is the sponsor for this entire series, and we're quite happy to have them on board. And if you want to view any of our previous episodes, and this current episode will be up towards the end of the week, please go to audainartmuseum.com. Next week, we'll be talking with Angela Grossman, and I want to say again, thank you, Laurie in Boundary Bay, and have a great evening. Good night, Laurie.
Hi, Curator. Have a good one.
Thanks. And thank you to all of our viewers. Good night.